Journey to Ironman, Florida, episode 11. I am, as I record this, 19 days away from competing in Ironman, Florida on Panama City Beach, November the 5th, 2022, and I want to thank you for joining me as I talk about how I train and how I build up to taking on the challenge of a 140.6 mile Ironman race. And I've been training for this race all year, really for the last 3 years, just with consistent triathlon training. The last 2 years were devoted to middle distance training. This year has been devoted to long distance training. There's not a whole lot of difference for the most part, especially during like pre and postseason phases, training for middle distance and long distance races. But now I'm training for a longer distance race. Obviously, as you get closer to that race, you want your training to, more closely replicate what you're going to deal with in the race. So there's been some changes to the sort of things that I do. Overall, my training cycle this year has been a 10-week preseason with 5 to 7 hours of weekly training volume. That's counting swim, bike, and run, not necessarily other things like strength training, mobility training, walking, stuff like that. That all works toward building toward the goal too. I just don't categorize that the same way. And then a 14-week preseason where I would do 7 to 10 hours of weekly training volume. The focus of my early season training is a lot of strength, endurance work, tissue resilience, skill development, the sort of things that I want to work on in the off season or the preseason to prepare me for a long race build. So right now I'm in week 11, or just past week 11 of my 14-week race-specific build, and I'll put up here a little bit of the volume of training that I've been doing each and every week over these last 11 weeks, and the volume is very high, and I'm only able to do this effectively because of all the work that I did in years past, and also because of the work that I did in the preseason and in the postseason phases of my training, where I built my body up to the point where I have the capacity to train at this high volume without it wearing me down, without risking injury, without it causing high levels of fatigue that I can't effectively recover from. So as you see on there, I've been averaging 15 hours per week training over these last 11 weeks. There's been some ebbs and flows to it, which is intentional, right? You see the week of 9-5, I did almost 22 hours of training, and then the week following that is a little bit less, right? That is by design. So that's, this is all part of preparing my body, getting as much work in as I can, recovering from it, and then keep doing that cycle over and over and over again. It's a real challenge to train for a race like this because while this is a lot of training volume, it's still not enough. And really when training for an Ironman race or a race of that distance, you can't train too much for it, provided you get the intensity right and you allow for proper recovery. So, on the running I'm doing, last week I ran about 41 miles. Most of that is easy running. Most of those miles I've run over this whole year have been easy, slow miles. It's been hot here. I've been taking it slow, keeping my heart rate down, not trying to stress myself out too much. And it's worked, right? I feel great now when I'm running. All this training is really paying off. I got one more big week of work coming up. That's this upcoming week. And then after that, I'm going to start to cut down on the volume, cut down on the intensity, taper for the race. So the plan is on November the 5th, I will show up as well prepared as I can be, but recovered from all the training. I will have shaken off any lingering fatigue that I've had from training like this for so long, and I will be ready to attack the race with my full energy and fully prepared and put forth my best effort and race up to my full potential. So that's where I'm at globally with this training. Last week, Again, it was a pretty big week of training. I hit almost 17 hours. There was a lot of running, right? I've got to get ready to run a marathon at the end of Ironman Florida. I don't have the capacity to run enough to properly prepare for a marathon. If I wanted to prepare for a marathon, I would be, running 30 plus miles every week. I'd be doing longer runs, 16, 20, maybe 24 miles on occasion, just to get my body used to that. The fact of the matter is, with the Ironman training, since I have to train the swim and the bike and recover, I can't do 20-mile runs and recover from that. So what I've done is clustered a lot of running together. There have been back-to-back long runs. There's been 3 to 5 day clusters where I've done running each one of those days, or 4 out of 5 of those days, just to build up the resilience and the leg strength that, on race day, hopefully I'll have the leg strength to be able to run the marathon effectively. Obviously, it's not going to be the fastest marathon effort I have in me, but I feel pretty confident that I'm going to be able to run the marathon and run the marathon effectively. And I'd really love to set a PR in the marathon. I know it's going to be a difficult challenge, but I've run one marathon before. It was something like 4:05. I was disappointed not to get it in under 4 hours. So that's really kind of what I'm looking forward to just getting off that bike on race day and being able to run and seeing what I've got. So this week was a lot of running. Monday was a easy 6.1 mile recovery run. I kept it in zone 2. My average heart rate was like 124 beats per minute. Doing it on the treadmill makes it a lot easier to control for the variables that I face running in South Florida, namely the heat and humidity. It's hard to run at an easy effort level. Here, when the heat index is 95 or 100 or 105, it just stresses the system a lot. And there's a lot of value in training in the heat, but it's also a stressor. So I need to balance that on a recovery day. 6.1 miles is still kind of a long run, so I do that inside on the treadmill. Took it nice and easy. Tuesday was a 3,500-yard swim at the outdoor pool. It went pretty well. And then in the afternoon, I did another easy run, this time outdoors. It was a very hot day, but I worked a bit on my run-walk intervals for the marathon. At the very least, I intend to be walking the aid stations. So what that looks like is every mile I stop and I walk for 30 seconds, right? And the walking is done with purpose, with good form, right? All this stuff. Simulating race conditions. Because it can be hard to start running again once you start walking, especially if you're fatigued. So it's something that I want to get a little bit of practice with. I don't particularly like to walk when I run. There's no shame in it, right? But my ego doesn't like it. It slows you down. But it's something I'm working on now. It makes running in the heat a lot easier. I worked a bit on fueling too, taking the Moritin gels. I'm planning on taking about 3 an hour during the Ironman run. So I've been taking a lot of those now just to see how my gut reacts to that, and to see how I'm able to run with taking a high volume of those, since I know I might, need to take in a lot of calories during the race. I'm working on that kind of stuff now. That run went pretty well all in all, a slow pace, but it is what it is, right? Wednesday morning, I did another run. This was a threshold run. The main set was 8 by 1 kilometer at a very high speed. It was very stressful. It was very hot and humid that morning. This is the only threshold run I've done during this entire training cycle. So it's not something I do a lot of, right? Most of my running is nice and easy. This was the most intense run I've done so far. Ended up being 8.6 miles with the running I did before and after the main set. And then that afternoon, I did another run. I did 4.1 miles. Again, an easy zone 2 run. I did it on the treadmill. I didn't want to deal with the stress of the heat and humidity of doing it outside again twice in the same day. So I just did that on the treadmill. Took it nice and easy. That went pretty well. And it was a good way to get in a lot of running volume during the day without it being super taxing on my body. Thursday morning, I was planning on hoping to swim in the ocean, but I decided to go to the gym across the street instead. It's easier. It conserves some of my energy. There's weather concerns, right? I have to think about the global overall training picture, and while I like to swim in the ocean, it beats you up and it's another stressor, right? So I opted for the pool instead. The swim went really well. I was pleased with that. Thursday afternoon, I was on the bike again. I did a moderate intensity 2-hour bike ride on the indoor trainer. Friday morning, I did another moderate intensity, this time an hour on the indoor bike trainer. Fridays are somewhat of a recovery day for me usually. I hit a good strength training session in the afternoon on Friday. My strength training sessions have fallen off a little bit in recent weeks, and I'm okay with that. There's not a ton of value to be gained from my strength training at this point. It's still an important supportive habit, but with all the run, bike, and swim volume I'm doing, it's hard to get these strength training sessions in. Sometimes I don't have the energy to do the 2 a week. So there's been a few weeks where I've only done 1, but I'm still going to prioritize that for these next 2 weeks as I build toward race day. Saturday morning, I did an early morning swim, which is a big challenge for me. It's hard for me to get up and feel good on these early morning swims. I fueled a little bit differently for it. I had some more carbs. It helped. I felt better during the swim. I still didn't perform particularly well. I was a little disappointed in that. I felt kind of lethargic, but I got it done. I came home, I refueled, hung out for a few hours, and then I went out for another easy 10.9 mile zone 2 run, working again on fueling and on the run walk intervals, right? So that makes it a lot easier for me knowing that, you get to walk pretty much 30 seconds out of every mile or a little bit more than that. So that run went pretty well again, and parts of that run it got overcast and rained a little bit, and I felt cooler and I felt really strong on my feet. Then it got hot and humid again, and pace slowed down again. But overall, I feel really good about my running. On the few opportunities I've had to run in cooler conditions here in South Florida, it's cooling down a little bit. So those few times I've gotten to run when it's been a little cooler, my running pace has increased as I've hoped it would. So I think in Panama City Beach on November the 5th, I will be in good shape for this run. It's going to be, for the most part, after the sun goes down, it's going to be much cooler and less humid. Temperatures should be in the 60s, which after spending this whole summer and early fall in South Florida running in a heat index that's pretty much always over 90 degrees, it's been really stressful. It's been really challenging. So I'm looking forward to that run and being able to run in some cooler temperatures. I know I'll be tired from having done the swim and the bike, but just being running in those conditions is going to be great. So I wrapped the week up on Sunday with a ride on the indoor bike trainer. It was over 3 hours, 61 miles on Zwift for whatever that's worth. And then I did a 3.8 mile run outside off the bike, simulating a race condition, a brick workout. It went pretty well. I did 20 minutes at race pace, followed by a 5-minute interval at above race pace. It was a hot, humid afternoon. It was right at like 12:30, 1 o'clock. So there was additional stress from the heat. So it was a kind of a challenge for me to maintain race pace. It was really a challenge for me to push above race pace, but I was able to do it even in the heat and humidity. So I think that bodes pretty well for race day. I just got to make sure that I adequately recover from the stress of the heat and the stress of running in the heat. So I'll be mindful to do that. I do a lot of the bike workouts on my indoor trainer. I get questions about that. Riding outside is great. It's a challenge to ride outside at the volume that I train, and it's also challenging for me to hit certain intensities and do certain intervals riding outside. Here in South Florida, there's lots of traffic lights, there's lots of red lights, there's intersections, there's heavy traffic. So, it's hard to ride, a 20-minute race pace interval without stopping. Or it's hard to ride a 5-minute zone 4 interval, right? On the indoor trainer, it's easy. There's a lot of other benefits to using the indoor trainer. So I do ride outside as appropriate, right? I've gotten, 6 or 7 really long rides outside in, but I have to take those for what they are. They're going to be endurance rides. They're, they're going to be times for me to work on fueling and hydration and for me to get comfortable on the bike. Being outside on the bike, but I do most of my effective training on the indoor trainer. So that's how it goes, and that's week 11 for me. One more big week of training left to go. I am looking forward to putting this training cycle behind me, Don't get me wrong, this training has been grueling, it's been intense, it has been the hardest thing that I've ever done, but I feel great, I feel fully prepared for this race, and I'm pretty much ready to go. So I've got a few more days of putting in the really hard work, then I get to taper, and then I get to line up and put it all out there on November the 5th.